It's complicated, right? It's complicated and we're trying to simplify something. That's usually why we have assumptions. We have these generalizations. We have, these pattern recognitions where we're trying to up our speed of info processing. And so we jump to a conclusion about something that we don't necessarily always have the right information about. Because situations are dynamic and life is not static, but information on a paper is static. And what am I talking about? So there's a conversation that I heard between two of my mentors the other day, and I'm not going to name names because then you're going to jump to conclusions about what they're saying, but one of the interesting things that one of them was saying to the other was, it's interesting. Let's say that there was an astronaut from another country, you could say alien, but I don't want to say alien. If I say alien, people are going to be like, oh, forget about it. So let's say an astronaut from another country is looking down from outer space at us, and they're studying our society, our culture. And all of a sudden, they're trying to figure out why we have so many problems with health industry or health and wellness in our country. And they see all these ambulances leaving car accidents and things of that, like disasters. And they jump to the conclusion that the ambulance is causing the dysfunction, because every time there's a huge disruption, there's an ambulance. And they're not understanding the cause and effect, and they don't know the true nature of the situation. So they might jump to that conclusion that an ambulance is the problem, and if they get rid of the ambulance, there's not going to be any disruption. Well, obviously, it's syntax, it's one thing came before another, and whatever, all these other things. But, it's a good example. And maybe somebody might think that's an overgeneralization. That's fine, too. And I'm not trying to make this complicated. But my point in the entire thing, 2 minutes into this, is the fact that often we look at things that are really complicated and we try to simplify them too much. Or it's the opposite. But today I'm not talking about something that's simple that we try to make too complicated. Today it's actually the opposite. We try to simplify something that we don't know all the information on, and so we jump to a conclusion. I'm going to give you another example. And this example is going to be one that shows up all the time. It's often that we'll have dysfunctions with some of our athletes that are overusing their elbow. Now, or not necessarily even overusing, they had an injury at some point and then it wasn't able to recover. Now, sometimes it's important to identify the muscle. Sometimes it's not as important. Sometimes it comes down to nutrition. There's a bunch of different ways that you can treat something to heal it and then to have it not come back again. But one of the tricky muscles, there's a couple. One is anconeus. I'm not going to get into anconeus because that is a whole other bag of tricks. But brachioradialis is another one that's in there. And it doesn't always play nice with a couple of different muscles. But brachialis also comes into play, and then biceps brachii is in there. Now, everybody knows, you've probably heard the term bicep by flexing your arm, right? It's the prime mover. Well, that's true. However, and this is a big however that people fail to recognize sometimes, when you move, basically the radial and ulnar joints, then what happens is you shift the muscles that are the prime movers. Now, and if you change the angle at your elbow where you add resistance, it changes where the pressure is. Now, the interesting thing is brachialis sometimes, depending on the angle and the leverage point, might be the prime mover. Sometimes brachioradialis might be. Now, here's where it gets even trickier, and there's a reason why I'm bringing this up, is brachioradialis can be involved in supination, which actually is the opposite. So that's pronation and supination. So it's involved in both. How can it be involved in two opposing movements? It's kind of mind-boggling, right? Because how could one be doing one thing and the other potentially? It doesn't happen at the same time. It happens at different times. That's how it's possible. But the fact is, it's involved in both of the movements, which is kind of mind-boggling, which means it's very difficult if you have a lot of this going on or that to allow that brachioradialis to heal. That's where it gets complicated. But the reason why I'm talking about it today is that we often jump to these conclusions that seem like they're really simple, and they're not always simple. Meaning, come on, we all remember a time when people said don't have fats in your diet. You remember a time, and that time is now, where people say don't have carbs, like none at all, zero. But try to be a super athlete, don't have any carbs. Okay, let me know how that works from like a power standpoint. We've heard the don't have any cholesterol in your diet thing. That's pretty challenging. And all of these things to some extent have been misleading and inaccurate. Now at the same time, there's, on the opposite side of the fence, are mold, pesticides, and excitotoxins that really haven't been brought to the surface the way that they should be as to how detrimental they are in our life. So we've got so many of these situations where people are looking down on something and saying, these ambulances, we've got to get rid of these ambulances, they're causing these accidents. But that's not the way that it's actually happening. Just like brachioradialis, just like fats, you're jumping to the wrong conclusion from the information that you see in front of you, because we're trying to rush a decision on something that's a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more complicated. So the next time that you make a huge decision about the way that you're going to do something as it relates to your health or your lifestyle, think about that brachioradialis and think, geez, is there something that might be involved in going this way and that way? And how do I make use of that? Or is there something that I believe that's not accurate, that if I change that belief and the way that that interacts with me and my lifestyle, I can immediately have more success than I do right now because it's detrimental to my progress. So imagine if you're thinking right now in one of those ambulance situations, and we all kind of have at least one or two of them in our life, and then when you catch yourself on them, you're like, man, that was really, really foolish.